of the protests against the bondholder bailout in Ireland. Tell us about the campaign.
We started on March 6th, 2011, which was the weekend after the last general election. And I'd say, in common with a lot of Irish people, I had voted for a change of government because they had made all the right noises, we thought, in terms of, sharing the burden and, lifting the bank debt burden and all this kind of stuff. But within hours of the election, never mind days, within hours of the election, I had Enda Kenny on Irish radio and talking about, I don't know who he'd spoken to, but it seemed that we're not going to be able to volunteer after all. And at the time, across North Africa, there were all kinds of real protests going on, dangerous protests, people taking their lives in their hands, and I worked in Libya for a long time.
Yeah,
Benghazi. Yeah, and they
so this is happening around the same time.
This is happening around the same time.
Did you find yourself a common cause with these folks that were seeking independence? Because in effect, the banks in Ireland have occupied the Irish people. There's an occupation going on, not unlike the British occupation from time immemorial. This is a financial occupation. It's the problem. One of the problems that people don't understand, that when you have a financial occupation like you do with the banks, the terrorist banks in Ireland, that because it's not outright land grabbing, but using financial instruments, that it's hard to communicate that.
Yes, far more, but it's just as effective, probably far more effective as well, because like 70 billion is the actual bank debt burden that we've been lending, with 69.7 billion. And like people are just not aware of it. And I think the scale of it as well gets people. I mean, if you were talking about, there's 5 million or 10 million or whatever, but I think once you start mentioning billions at home, I think people's eyes kind of glaze over.
Okay, let me ask that question. How much was the total bailout of these unsecured international bondholders by the Irish taxpayer?
Well, so far we have poured like the sum. There was a blog spot at home. There was a brilliant blog spot called Nama Wine Lake. I'm sure you might have come across it.
What's it called?
Nama Wine Lake.
Oh, the Nama Wine Lake. Of course, Nama being the slush fund that all the bad debts are being laundered through, and it's similar to the wine lake in France, where they have this, subsidies by the government to keep the wine industry going. So this is a government subsidy reference, the Nama Wine Lake.
Exactly, all one word. But he did the numbers on it, and it's 69.7 billion. That's what we've put in there so far. Some of that money is money that has been taken from us, like we had the pension reserve fund, where we had savings, There was 20.7 billion that was actually taken from that pension reserve fund and poured into the banks. Then the rest of it is money that is actually owed now to Europe. So between the two of them, it comes to about 69.7 billion. And, it's worth to us about 15,000 euro per person now. If you take an average family of 2 adults, 3 kids, it's about 75,000 euro per family. That debt has just been put onto the shoulders of the Irish people at home. It is unprecedented in scale. Has never happened like this before in scale.
So it's worse than any occupation in the history of Ireland, you could say, in that it would be more like, you'd have to compare it to the famine, because what you've done here is you've created a man-made famine of credit, so that you're starving people to death in a way using financial instruments. So here you've escaped the whole Troubles period and the famine period, only to be visited by another plague of locusts, the banksters, and they look like they could finish the job. The Irish soul is at stake here, because even your local media in Ireland refuses to cover the fact that Irish people are being terrorized by banksters. What's wrong with this Irish media? Are they just corrupt, or are they stupid?
Well, it's actually, there's another parallel as well, because like you talk about the famine, there was no famine in Ireland. I mean, this has gone into the election time, this has now gone into the general acceptance. In the same way that there was no bailout. People talk about the famine in Ireland, they now talk about the bailout.
Okay, I like this idea. So talk about this for a second. There was no famine.
There was no
meaning
famine.
What?
There was a shock that there was a failure of one food, and it was the staple food of the people, the staple food of the people, the potato. But we were exporting beef and the corn and the oats and everything else from Ireland at the time of this so-called famine. A famine means that there is absolutely no food. We were exporting food. There was a decision taken by the government at the time, which was the British government, to just let the people die. Now what you have here, you talk of the bailout in Ireland. There was no bailout in Ireland, there was a bail-in. We didn't get a cent of debt write-down with the so-called bailout. Not 1 cent of debt write-down did we get.
And these debts, by the way, are unsecured.
Unsecured.
Completely unsecured, which means the bondholder took all the risk.
Yeah, but
and they took none of the risk.
Yeah, but now we have it, and it is, what we got was debt piled on debt. We got additional debt in this so-called bailout. What was bailout? When, like, prior to the try to come in, the memorandum of understanding, like if the IMF came into any country, one of the first people hit were the bondholders. They took a hit. When the IMF came into Ireland, they were accompanied by the EU and the ECB. And the one thing that the ECB had in mind when they came in was to bail out their banks and to bail out the euro. It wasn't to bail out Ireland. And that's what they got. And now we're hearing that we're going to exit this bailout. Well, as I've said many times to people, when the IMF, when they try to leave, they will be leaving with a smile on their faces because everything that they came to achieve, they will have achieved. Everything that they've come to achieve, they've achieved. They'll be leaving here, and we have legacy debt. We are now debt slaves in Ireland for the next 40 years, just on the promissory notes alone, and this is what we're focusing on now. We have a major move coming up using the technical group in the Dáil. The technical group in the Dáil is made of...
The what?
The technical group, they call
Okay,
it.
the technical group in the Dáil being the parliament, essentially, of Ireland.
And these are independents in the group. They go from the extreme left to the extreme right. But they come together as a technical group just to give themselves voting rights and speaking rights and everything else, because there is no democracy in the Irish Parliament. So they've come together for the first time ever behind one of the proposals that we have for bank debt relief in Ireland. The first one, which is the ending of the promissory notes. You've surely heard of the promissory notes, Max.
Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, okay, so you're leading into this idea that you're having some success here. Yes. But I wanted, before we get into that, just point out about the debt itself and this idea of exiting the bailout, which is the bail-in, as you more accurately describe it, because this is the headline in the Financial Times and the financial press and in the German press. Your Nazi overlords have said that, oh, Ireland is exiting the bail-in, but this is really just sophistry. It's playing with words, because they just transferred the debts over to another creditor. It's like the mafia selling the debt to another mafia kingpin to get out of some favors, correct?
Yeah, we'd added interest each time. Like with the promissory notes, for example, it was 31 billion euros. This is in 2010. 31 billion euros. And you think of the scale of the Irish economy. The GNP in the Irish economy is 130 billion per annum. 31 billion to bail out two insolvent banks using the Emergency Liquidity Assistance Fund, which specifically states it can't be used to bail out insolvent banks. But they did it because they were afraid of contagion across Europe. They were afraid of, so they did it to save the euro.
And mostly it was Anglo-Irish.
Anglo-Irish, yeah, 25 billion to Anglo-Irish.
Which is not a retail bank where people have deposits. It's just a bank set up to finance speculation in a huge Ponzi scheme.
It was one of the main rotten banks, if you like, in Ireland. So it was not done for the benefit of the Irish people. 31 billion euro. They had nothing to back.
Is Sean Fitzpatrick in jail yet? Where is Shawnee? I mean, he was running Anglo-Irish, right?
I was looking at the tower across the river here.
Tower of London.
And we badly need something like that in Ireland now, just to throw people into, because...
Well, the medieval days had it simple. In China these days, if Sean was in China, he would have been beheaded already. But because he's in Ireland, he's not beheaded. But that's just an arbitrage of legal precedents that, unfortunately, China seems to be more up to speed on this stuff. But now you're having success.
Well, we've managed to get this group together. I mean, in a way, I suppose it's a microcosm of what we've been trying to do in Ireland, because we've gotten every branch of political thought united behind this one thing. Because what we said from the very beginning here is this is a European problem. This was not an Irish problem. It was forced on us. It was the launch of the euro, which was a totally incomplete currency. It should never have been launched the way it was launched. It was daft, it was mad, it was crazy. And when the proverbial hit the fan, we were the first in line.